Let's do some ancient misconception busting. So here are 5 misconceptions from ancient history, which I often see around, which really we don't have much in the way of evidence to support.
The first 2 are going to be about gladiators. Number 1, the whole oath thing. We who are about to die, those who are about to die. Gladiators never said that, or rather, there's no evidence that gladiators ever said that. There's one instance of it, and it was in Ormakia, which was a sea battle, and it wasn't gladiators fighting, and it certainly wasn't gladiators that were saying it. Number 2, gladiator sweat being sold as an aphrodisiac. Again, no. There's no sources which mention this. There are sources which talk about athlete sweat, and that being sold for various purposes, but gladiator sweat being sold as an aphrodisiac, never found a reference for it. If you found a reference for it, please send it on, because I'd be very interested. But no, there's no evidence that I know of that supports this. Number 3, time for some Spartans, and there are actually quite a few that you can do on the Spartans. But this one is about how the elders used to inspect babies, and if they weren't deemed fit enough, the elders would make sure they were off a cliff. That never happened. There was infanticide practiced in ancient Greece, but that specific type of infanticide we have no evidence for. It's mentioned by Plutarch, but it seems to be a reference about a mythical age of Sparta, or rather Lycurgus and what he brought in to make Sparta as tough as it was. But there's actually no real evidence for it from any contemporary sources. And in fact, the spot that he mentioned has been excavated, and they've not found any human remains. So this just sounds like one of those very popular "aren't the Spartans tough," or rather weren't the Spartans tough, which was a really, really big thing around the time that Plutarch was writing. Number 4, the Olympics, or rather the marathon. That one where Phidippides runs from the battlefield at Marathon all the way to Athens, announces victory, and then passes away. Well, that really didn't happen. Or rather, that specific narrative, we don't have the evidence for. Now, there are elements of it which do sort of, well, I'll explain, and hopefully you'll understand where this might have come from. So what we have is, we have an account of Phidippides running to Sparta from Athens, okay? That's to appeal for support from Athens. That's it, and Herodotus mentions this. Interestingly, no contemporary historian of the time, so for example Herodotus, Thucydides, and I'm going back to Herodotus here because he would have loved this story, none of them mentioned that a runner ran from Marathon to Athens. That doesn't appear until Plutarch, many centuries later, and he says that there was an individual who ran from the battlefield to Athens and then passed away. But he names him as Euclides. He doesn't name him as Phidippides. So this seems to be a sort of amalgamation of events which then gets picked up, romanticized, and becomes an enduring myth. That particular thing didn't happen. There may have been a runner that we don't have contemporary evidence for running from Marathon to Athens, but they weren't certainly called Phidippides. Oh, and yes, I did an entire episode with Professor Sonia Nevin all about Marathon. Very, very interesting. We talk about those misconceptions, other misconceptions, actually what happened and how the Athenians treated the battle and how they managed it politically, all sorts of stuff. Go and check it out if you like that kind of thing. Last and by all means least, number 5, Roman soldiers were paid in salt. No, they weren't. They were paid in coin. They were never paid in salt. There's a really interesting article or blog piece by Kiwi Hellenist, which goes into this. If you can find it, it's well worth reading. It goes into all the detail. Essentially, misconceptions, mistranslations, layers and layers of misunderstanding afterwards, and it's come to the conclusion that somehow Romans were paid in salt. No, they weren't.